Hi, I'm Amanda Huffman. I'm the voice behind Airman to Mom, and I'm going live because it's Tuesday, and that's kind of what I've been doing, and it's getting a little bit easier each time, so I hope that you listen. And I'm on the wrong page, so I'll find my notes. That's part of how it makes it easier to do these Facebook Lives. So anyways, last week, one of my friends read some of the blog posts that I've been writing, and the things I've been talking about how military service and being a military spouse are different. And she had a lot of good questions, and she made a lot of good points about her perspective of some of the things that she had to give up to be a military spouse. And I've been wrestling a lot with what she had to say. I still believe that there's a big difference between military service and military spouses. I think they're both important, and I think that they're different. And so I'm trying to work some of the things that she talked about, because I think they're really important to mention about how much work being a military spouse is, into words, and then also my experience of being both a military spouse and a military veteran, and how I look at those two things differently. They're both very hard, but in different ways, and they both have different meanings. So I've been thinking a lot about her questions and trying to come up with ways to answer them. And yeah, so it's been a very interesting week, and I'm really thankful that she reached out and asked those questions, because without her, I guess, encouragement in a way, I wouldn't realize how important it is to talk about the things that I'm talking about. So this week I decided to focus on the top 5 things from my military service that I'm proud of, and why I'm proud of those things. And yeah, so let's get started. Let's see if I missed anything. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was surviving boot camp. I feel like a lot of the things that I ended up writing about were things that I either felt before I joined the military, or things that I had to do to become an officer in the Air Force. If you don't know, being in the military, it isn't like you just sign up and ship off to boot camp the next day. There's usually a long waiting process, and for being an officer, I started ROTC 4 years before I became an officer, and I started looking into ROTC like the semester before, so it was like a 4.5-year process to become an officer. And there were many different challenges, and many of the people who started the ROTC program with me didn't make it all the way through to become an officer. I think our class of 20-ish people was down to 5 on commissioning day. So, and some people just decided the military wasn't for them. Some people, they didn't have the grades to stick with the ROTC program. And then a few of the people I knew, they didn't make it through the boot camp that I'm talking about. And so some person I knew was medically disqualified. So there's a lot to becoming even an enlisted person. Has to go through meeting with different recruiters, going to MEPS, going to waiting to go to boot camp, and then going through boot camp and doing all those things. So it's not just a quick process to go from military. It's the thought, I want to join the military. It takes a lot of process and time and commitment before you even join the military. And so that was one of the things that going through, we called the officer version of boot camp that I went through was called field training. It was 4 weeks in Florida in the summer, and it was, I'm a words of affirmation girl is one of my primary love languages, and quality time, and you don't get either of those when you're at boot camp, so that makes it kind of difficult to go through that type of thing. And so I really struggled. I didn't thrive through boot camp, but I did make it through. And one of the reasons I think that I was able to complete the field training is because I did a lot of prep work before, and then I also, I'm pretty athletically inclined, and so the running and marching and that sort of thing was really easy for me, so it wasn't as difficult in that aspect. It was just the mental stress and I said marching, but I preferred to be someone at the front who would help block traffic, which was a lot easier than marching because I was physically fit, so I found ways around it. So that was one of the ways I got through it, and on graduation day I was so glad that the 29 or 30 days, I think it was 29 because day 0 and we finished on 28, were over, and that I didn't have to do that again. But it was really hard for me, and even when I got home, it was really difficult to transition back to normal life because a lot of my self-confidence had been knocked down through, because I'm a words of affirmation person, so that type of training environment was really hard for me. The next thing on my list is graduating with my degree in civil engineering, and I attribute this to military service because before I joined ROTC, which is the Reserve Officer Training Program, which is the program I went through to become an officer, I was doing math, and because I liked math, but I don't really like math theory, and one of the cadets that I met at the open house to look into joining ROTC suggested that I switch to engineering, and I did, and it was really a good choice for me because engineering is something I didn't really know anything about, but it's all focused on math and building things, and so, and while I was in, thanks Adriana, while I was in the Air Force, I got my professional engineering license. I took the EIT, which is Engineering and Training exam. It's an 8-hour test that's based on engineering. I don't know, math and science. And then in Ohio, I took the professional engineering exam, which is another 8-hour test, 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon, and I passed, and so I got my PE license, and through the experience of being in the military and using my degree, I was able to get both my PE license and my engineering degree, which I don't use anymore because I'm a stay-at-home mom / blogger, but I still am very proud of the hard work that went into that, whatever that means. Anyways, on to the third thing, which actually I accomplished in the military. I deployed to Afghanistan in 2010. I was in the Air Force, and the Air Force has this cool agreement that they loan out military personnel to the Army. In my case, the Army doesn't have civil engineers in the way of civil engineer degree type engineers. Their combat engineers are about moving forward because that's what the Army does. They don't usually stay static. They're trying to gain ground and take back land. At least that's the traditional Army, not the Army we know today, but that's what their combat engineers are trained to do, and not really like the Air Force has a base, and so we have civil engineers who maintain the base. So we have different capabilities, and the mission I went on was a provincial reconstruction team where we would go out into the cities, villages, not really cities, villages of Afghanistan and help them reconstruct / build, because there wasn't anything, houses, schools, roads, bridges, government buildings, and wells, and retaining walls. Those are just a few of the things. Not houses. I don't know why I said houses. I was thinking about how they had mud hut houses, and then I said houses. So they have mud hut houses, and then we help them build these giant buildings It didn't make a lot of sense, but that's what we did. And if you want to read more about my deployment experience, there's a bunch of deployment stories. They're the letters that I sent home while I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2010, a little bit revised and changed. And if you go to like the military life section of my blog, it's like one of the first things under there. My deployment, PRT Kapisa. So yeah, so my deployment was something that was really hard and not really something I expected when I joined the Air Force, because I joined the Air Force, not the Army. But when you sign up to be in the military, you kind of give them a blank check to do whatever they want to do with your life, I guess. And so when they said you're going to Afghanistan with the Army, good luck. I went, and it ended up being overall a good experience, even with many of the challenges that I faced. And 3 of the people that I met through my deployment I'm still very close with today. I'm actually going to go see 2 of them at the end of the month, and we're going to run a half marathon at Disneyland. I say Disneyland, Disney World. They're not doing half marathons at Disneyland right now. So anyways, so I'm really excited about that, and those 3 friends that I talk to almost daily they make the deployment experience worth it, especially the bad parts that have kind of faded away with time because it's been a while. But yeah, so my deployment was one of the things I was proud of from my military service. And I also received a Bronze Star for my service in Afghanistan, and I'm very proud of that too. The last 2 things are kind of tied together, but my overall experience of being in the Air Force, when I joined the Air Force, the first thing I had to do was, the first thing I had to do was I commissioned, and they were like, you're going to school in Alabama. And I was like, okay, and I was in California. So the option was to fly, but you wouldn't have your car, and you'd have to figure out how to get to your car for my case, from California to New Mexico. So I decided to drive from California to Alabama by myself when I just graduated college. So I was 22, 23 years old. And looking back on that now, I was like, that was kind of crazy because I had never done anything like that before. So I don't really know how that all worked out, but it did. And I went from California to Alabama, and then after the 6 or 8 weeks of training in Alabama, 2nd Lieutenant School, it's called ASBC, which is Air and Space Basic Course, but really it's 2nd Lieutenant School. And then they said, okay, you're done with school. And then luckily for the trip back from Alabama to New Mexico, my parents flew out to Alabama, so I wasn't alone. So I drove from Alabama back to New Mexico, and yeah, so that was kind of crazy that the first thing I did when I joined the military was drive across the country by myself. And yeah, I didn't think it was crazy at the time, but now looking back, I'm like, that was kind of nuts. And so the other thing about being in the military is that I made a lot of different friends, and I met a lot of different people, and I lived in a lot of different places. And so I feel like my perspective of the world has changed a lot, especially going to Afghanistan and seeing pretty much a third world country-ish. I was in Kapisa, which is, Kabul is here, and then Bagram's over here, and then Kapisa's over there. That was a really bad map drawing, but but I was in Kapisa, which is very rural, and there was mud huts, and the farther north that we would drive until the road stopped, it was mainly farms and huts, and it was, yeah, very, very rural, very different than America. And so I think being there changed my perspective, and then living in Ohio and living in New Mexico, and soon we'll be living in Virginia, that all changed my view on how life is and makes it not so so small, because I grew up in a semi-small town. I grew up in Fresno, California, which is, I guess, about 500,000 people, but I still feel like it's a small town, especially now that we live in LA, which is not a small town. I never really moved. We never moved outside of Fresno, and mainly we would only travel up and down California. And so, yeah, so my life has changed dramatically in the last, at least 10 years. I guess more than 11, because my husband and I just celebrated our 11th anniversary, and I married him right before I commissioned. So, yeah, 11 years, life's really changed. And then the last thing, I think maybe this is something that resonates with a lot of other people who have joined the military, but being part of something greater than myself. When I was in the military, I always felt like whatever I was doing was somehow important to the bigger mission at large. When I was in New Mexico, I was helping rebuild the base as they were retiring the F-117 Nighthawk and bringing in the F-22 Raptor. And so we had to change all the, a lot of the runway requirements were changing, and a lot of the hangar requirements were changing, and then there was a lot of other construction going on around the base. And so that was a cool job. And then in Afghanistan, I was helping directly with the people of Afghanistan, and meeting the kids and spending time with them while I was overseas, and just getting to interact not daily, like weekly with the people that were overseas, and then all the work that we did on base to help further the mission of Afghanistan and try and help the people. I feel like that was something greater than myself and something that I couldn't have done had I not joined the military. And then I think the military community stays with you long after you leave it. I'm in a few women veteran and other veteran groups, and the camaraderie and friendships between the people and the uplifting atmosphere are really encouraging. Oh, really? No, I'm from California. That's funny. No, we lived in Ohio before we moved to California, but originally I'm from Fresno, California, so that's why we wanted to come to LA, because my parents and my husband is from Fresno too. We met at well, he's not from Fresno, but we met at Fresno State in California. He's from Mariposa. So, yeah. But those were the 5 things that I thought of. I'm really excited to start talking about something I don't want to talk about. No, it's good to talk about something that I think a lot of people don't talk about, because it's uncomfortable and kind of difficult to think about, and really hard to put into words, because in the post that I'm going to be writing about next week, sometimes I think when people use words, they are using the same word, but it means different things. I feel like things that sometimes veterans or military people say is different than what a military spouse says, even if they're using the same word. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that next week. But thanks for listening, and if you have any questions about any part of my military service, or even what it's like to be a military spouse today, then just pop them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys all next week with another blog post. I guess it's a blog post review, because I'm talking about what's on my blog yeah, so I gave you a little hint about what's coming. Alright, bye! Thank you!